I'll try to keep it. But if you need any,
Let me get the recorder going here.
I just write the checks. That's it.
No,
Use your hammer. That's what Mr. Williams is proving over.
Okay, should we run it?
No, I bought it. No, I don't print. That's not true. And with the amount of work I have to do with it, it costs me.
Anytime.
There you go. Okay. 4 minutes late, but we'll call it to order. Open with the pledge and invocation. Please rise.
Yeah.
Ken.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Remain standing. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much that you are the God of the United States of America. We thank you for the Constitution, and we pray that each and every one of us impress upon us, Heavenly Father, the reason why we're here, the reason why we live here in America. Impress upon us the truths that you have set forth before us. Lord God, we thank you that we can gather in groups like this, freely speak our mind, and freely vote, and the votes be counted. Almighty God, we pray for harmony within this meeting tonight. We pray for your wisdom, your supreme wisdom as we make decisions. And we thank you, for you are the God Almighty. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Please be seated. Roll call, please.
Moss?
Aye.
Yerke?
Here.
Mueller?
Present.
Jovic?
Here.
Getty?
Here.
Williams?
Here.
Mack?
Here.
Bialotta?
Here.
Duraloo.
I'm here.
All present, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Item 4, approval of the agenda.
Everybody get their packets?
If there's an extra packet, Director Durlow would appreciate having one.
Anybody else need one? That's ours. He's getting yours. Yeah, I'm gonna grab one.
We have 2.
I got the board.
Think you make the cover.
I deliver, that's part of my job.
You do a good job.
Practicing for the mail service, are we?
Is that item number 15?
In this kind of weather.
13.
Mm-hmm.
13.
Are we, the approval of agenda.
Advertising, no, we got it.
I move to approve the agenda as written.
Second. Motion second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Approval of previous meeting minutes. So we've got a couple things to consider here for abbreviated. Dan.
Last time we talked about whether we wanted I call them the verbose minutes with a lot of detail, or the abbreviated, so I don't know if you want to discuss both of those or just decide which. It might be better to decide which one we're going to use and approve those rather than going through the long ones.
Mr. Chairman,
Jeanette?
may I suggest that we go by the abbreviated?
I'll second that.
Comment? It's a suggestion.
It's a motion.
Form of motion. Second yet? Abbreviated minutes. Discussion on that motion. Ken?
I found out in other meetings that there are some items that you need to expound on a little bit. So you might want to use your discretion on abbreviating everything.
Dan?
Well, I think you'll see even the abbreviated ones have more detail than what's required in the policy manual, which basically just says you want the motions, whether they carried or not. I don't even think they want motions that haven't carried, but I put all that in there.
The minutes that you've been presenting are kind of abbreviated up to this date, right? The minutes
No.
that you've been providing?
No, they've been
More
the
detail?
long version.
Oh, okay.
But the recordings are available online.
Yeah.
Right,
Correct.
the complete audio recording. Sometimes we have video issues, but the audio's always been there.
Any other discussion on abbreviated minutes? Those in favor of accepting abbreviated minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. So maybe a motion to approve these minutes, or do you want to push those, use of these abbreviated minutes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Treasurer's report, Mr. Williams.
All right, these are as of 10/5/18. You have those?
Yeah,
I'll wait till I get
spinning donut here.
In the corner, I can't see nothing.
Should we move the table down the middle?
Oh,
Is it not visible?
well.
It's hard to see.
At that angle, is it tougher to see?
I don't want to disrupt this whole meeting because of
We can scooch down, you can go.
While we're waiting for Dan's.
It's got to load up anyway, so we can come on down.
Oh, this is much better when I get down
Everybody over there okay?
there. Yeah, thank
If
you
you want
so
any more,
much.
you're going to have to sit on Dan's lap.
Thank God I don't need any more.
As much as I
Thank
get
you.
up and down
We're,
there.
we're fine then.
Okay, let's get started. Revenue received as of 10/5/18, $130,726.33. Projected revenue, $229,236.06. Funds on hand, $407,556.34. Director's expenses, $5,042.52. Total admin expenses, which cover things like website, printer, rent, phone, and memberships, $12,372.36. Total consulting fees and legal, $46,051.76. That includes Dan's contract. For our admin's budget, we've spent $63,466.66. The water projects, you'll notice there are 3 of them that they're zeroed out, 4 of them, sorry, that are zeroed out. Their monies were placed in the contingency fund, project fund up at the top, so that's $28,465. The other projects, we have the last payment of Rapid Creek DNA was $3,110. Rapid Creek DNA sampling done by South Dakota School of Mines for the pathogenicity test, $31,970. The water projects, $2,035. That's for the sponsor of the hydrology conference. Let's see, South Dakota School of Mines Rapid Creek analysis, Deerfield, Pactola, Rapid Creek, is $1,464.36. Canyon Lake sediment, we still had to pay on that, even though we've postponed it till April or March. Well, we've extended it till April or March with the USGS. It's $17,143 paid as of this date. Water projects, $84,187.36. If any of you have added that up, you'll note that the total number is 64 cents high, but I think that comes from the 64 cents and change that we got for somebody sent as a joke, $1.64. So somehow it's in our budget. Let's see. For total expenditures of $147,654.02 as of the 5th. Any questions?
Your greenhouse roof, we've not expended anything on that yet?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see, green. Yeah,
Did we
26,000.
give them the check first? Huh?
Yeah, that's,
I think they needed that.
do you want me to open up the project sheet?
Sure. This will give you a chance to see our new numbering scheme. I hope.
Kind of a short leash here.
No, it's not.
Do you want me to explain this?
I'm just trying to see why it wasn't reflected in the budget sheet. There's a year-to-date.
Off to the right is the balance due on all of these projects, so you can see the green roof is 0, so that's paid.
That means we paid the 26.
If we go down, can't show the whole thing at once, but if we go down, there's a balance due on the USGS Canyon Lake also, and that gives us total unpaid liabilities of about $72,000. And if anybody wants me to dwell on that longer.
Dan?
That Sharon Lake Highland HOA project, we didn't actually fund anything on that project, did we? Why is that on there?
We funded $2,000.
Oh, we did?
That was approved. I don't remember exactly. Well, it might be on here.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. So there was actually some money expended.
$2,000 check written to them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was approved a few years ago, and they didn't get around to it
Oh, okay.
until about 4 months ago.
Okay.
Do you want to show them this one too?
Yep. This one is actually how we'll start labeling each of our projects so that we can find them real quick. Along that first column, passive water project, U.S. quality monitoring at Canyon Lake. This means it opened in 17. It was the first one of that year. All these are going to be number 1 or 2 or 3, I see. Oh heck, there's even a 4. Good. It gives you an idea who it was for with USGS, the year, and then down at the bottom, can you pull it up just a little bit? You'll see there's a legend down here on the bottom for P is pending, A is approved, C is the portion that's been completed, 0 or O is going to be the money we owe, Z is for 0 balance owed, and X is for it didn't apply. So if you look back on your schedule, you can stuff the numbers there. You can see them at the last number. That's the key for these. So you'll see on that first one, it's AO for approved and money owed. Hopefully it's straightforward and make it easier for Dan to find these projects. Hopefully we'll also get a chance to go back through a few, numbering them the same way. Have any questions? Does it look okay?
Well, with regard to invoice, excuse me, Gurney, with regard to invoicing, do we need the project number on their invoice to track it in? Does that help us, or do we ask them?
That would probably be a good thing in the future. Right now, all I have is this column, which is their number. And some of these are, like this is just, the only thing I found is a memorandum of understanding. So there was really no official contract per se that I could find.
Sometimes we have monthly invoices or quarterly invoices, and I just wondered if maybe having that number would help us file it, track it.
You mean have them put
have
that number?
any kind of a payment request, invoice, etc., that project number on their invoice, kind of like our PO number, kind of in that sense, if that seems suitable. It's a question.
You want us to recommend that they use our number when they...
With the project as far as relationship, because sometimes, say USGS has 3 or 4 things going on here, might just clean it a little bit. Tracking purposes.
I agree, because some of these names are very similar, and if you just hear the name, like a couple of these both deal with maybe
Rapid Creek.
or DNA or something, and people get confused. So I'll make a note to try to get that.
Some of these are downstream
Put on the
ways
invoice.
as far as for the fund, but it's Ernie.
My question isn't going to help this USGS at all. I had somebody ask me a question today about we used to fund, apparently before I was on the board, we funded some costs for stream gauges from Deerfield to Dakota, water monitoring gauges, and I believe that we wanted to defund that and then went back and refunded it, or am I mistaken?
Pennington County.
On again, off again. And
But we had contributed prior to that.
prior to that, yes.
Do we have a position on that going forward?
Not been requested.
Okay.
The county funded it this past cycle.
Okay.
So
Are we open to funding if there was such a request?
I would hope we would be.
they're welcome to present to us and request.
Well, I'm looking for an answer for this person. So.
We funded that for 30 years. The West Dakota Water Development
Okay.
District funded that for 30 years, and then they voted not to fund it this last year, and the county stepped in and picked up part of it. And maybe the USGS folks are here, they could probably answer that maybe a little clearer,
But we may be open to
No
funding
comment.
it again.
but
We did a
I'm
They
at
couldn't
that
even
board.
show us use of those gauges.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
the request.
certainly willing.
We'd expect a request. I think we'd probably put a chunk in the budget.
Okay.
There's some anticipation of a possible request.
That was Roads 4
With forecast.
Roads Fork and Castle Creek.
and Castle Creek.
And those
we
are
do
the
have
two
a space
sources
that
of water coming into the Rapid Creek Basin, two of the main
we have
ones.
a space holder in the budget from last time.
Yeah. I would hope that we would fund those.
I'm hoping that in the presentation, this should be one of those things that they probably used as, they could have used as an example of what these 2 gauges were for, rather than flood.
So that'll be a topic another time once we get a presentation or a request. But anything else on the numbering system for projects? Looks like it's well thought through. and
Looks nice,
developed.
guys. Just complimenting the Mr. Williams and Mr. Mullally on the setup. I like it.
Thank you.
Me too.
I have one question of my own on that. Can we have those numbers so that they could be linked to from our website? I mean, you should be able to put in a search place those numbers and have it bring up on your
That project number?
Yeah,
Hot
so
link?
that might be expensive.
We could check in with the cost of something of that nature.
Are you saying put a link on the spreadsheet or to the
No,
website?
number, so it takes us to the that location in the website or in the spreadsheet? Is that something that's...
I'll have,
So if you're
Well, you're saying
sitting
link
there,
out on our website to bring you to this
Yeah.
list.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's
So,
reverse of that.
so you could actually see what's in there? Or is that too
We-
complicated?
I guess we'd have to give an estimate from our webmaster. It wouldn't be hard for them to just, we could post this whole thing on the website, and we could say project summary, and they click on that, and this whole thing opens. That would not be difficult.
That's essentially, do we have a limit of how many pages we can
Yeah,
utilize?
if you want to have a hyperlink on each one of these, then the more stuff you put in, the more chances it's going to break on you. Something isn't good
You're not
enough.
looking hyperlink between this page and the project description. You're
All I
just-
want is to have the
the
number
website.
on the website next to the projects, and then they can reference that when they call. But is there a way electronically to just tap that and have it go?
What do they see when they open that link?
They see, well, what we have here in the budget, I guess, or possibly the complete opening of all of the electric.
So would this be for just the general layman to understand what the project is about, or?
Yeah, we could use the executive summary from each one of those placed in there. And then they'd also have access to the numbers they could actually call if you needed additional information.
I would say that's very doable. It's a little,
I don't want
I
to
guess it
complicate
depends how many of these we get, and then deciding how long to leave them up there, things like that.
Okay. Well, we could talk about that later.
It's going to cost more.
Well, if you had current current projects, funded projects, or current projects, you bring it to this table, could you have your summaries below it as a link, and it jumps down?
Yeah, and there are some links, I think. There's a page called Projects that lists a lot of the things, and I'm not sure if those already link to something or not.
Okay.
I could make it an action item here to review that. Review the projects page.
Maybe have some semblance of understanding by December, or
Okay.
or are you looking for something earlier?
No.
Any other comments?
It'll just be you and me.
Just remember, your name's going on the agenda.
Yeah, I know. That's the way it goes.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, treasurer's report, or numbering, project numbering system? Okay. Motion to accept.
I make a motion to accept the treasurer's report.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Nay. One nay. Motion
No,
carries.
I'm just kidding. No,
Facetious
I
man.
voted yes.
Okay.
Which part, first or second?
Agenda item 7. Motion carries, by the way. Treasurer's reports in. Update groundwater flow model for Madison and Minnesota Aquifer by Bill Eldridge, USGS. Mr. Williams is assigned. Mr. Eldridge is present.
You bet, thanks. Can you bring up the presentation?
Yep.
And thanks for the introduction. Again, I'm Bill Eldridge. Been working for the USGS for a couple years. And one of the first projects I was given was to do a groundwater flow model of the Madison and Minnesota aquifers. This project had a few other people that contributed to it. One of the primary ones was the National Park Service. And you'll see in my presentation where I kind of have charts and maps and things focused on the national parks that are in the Black Hills, as well as the city of Rapid City. And again, that'll be another focus area because they contributed funding to it also. Can you go to presentation mode down at the bottom, just so it might be a little bit easier to see? A little bit to the left of that. And up. That, yeah, thanks. And then would it be okay if you'd push the down arrow at each one too?
Sure.
I appreciate that.
Just key in for the next slide and he'll have it.
Let me.
Maybe, if it works. Okay, so that's the second slide. That's perfect. So why would we be worried about these two aquifers, and why would we?
Let me start this. For some reason, it killed my
Oh, did it? Okay.
recorder. Okay,
You good?
I believe so.
Okay, thanks. So why are these two aquifers important, and why would we build a groundwater model of them? Our groundwater flow models are useful to understand the effects of, say, a drought period goes through. What's going to happen to the water levels in those aquifers during that drought period? Also, as you can see from the charts there, they kind of show the mid and southern Black Hills, and each one of those black dots are drill permits given by the. That's all right. You can up arrow it probably. There you go. Those black dots are permits issued by the South Dakota DENR at those different times, and so you can see that the number of wells that are going into the Black Hills has increased, especially around Rapid City area, which is about midway up and to the right, down around where Wind Cave, around the Hot Springs area, and then around Custer too. And so all those additional well withdrawals, what effect would that have on the aquifers as a whole? And so those are two things that a groundwater model can help answer. Yeah, Nathan?
Are you willing to answer questions?
Sure, you bet. You bet.
So you're assuming then that permits means that the well was developed and put into production?
I was just going to mention that. The other thing that those black dots don't assume, sometimes wells are plugged and are no longer active. So this is just well permits. So they might not all be active wells. But we do know the population growth over those last 25, 30 years would necessitates an increase in water use.
Do you have any idea like what fraction of the permits could have been non-productive wells?
I don't. I would have to estimate. Most of the time, just from researching a lot of well permits in this area and others, that by the time the driller is filling out a permit, he's got a productive well. If he drills a dry hole, usually somebody won't, pay for that, and it usually doesn't go into the permit unless the purpose of that well was to do like a study of the geology. So there's not very many permits that are out there that are unproductive wells. Does that sound about right, Joanne? There are a good portion of these could be plugged though or no longer in use.
Are these the water rights?
That's correct. Well,
Not
no,
just
they're
the
just
well
from
drillers.
the driller's logs.
They're
Yeah. It's usually not a high percentage where they report a log where it's unproductive. It'd be pretty
A
small.
lot of the old ones that are plugged don't have a lot.
That's correct.
Good.
Yes.
How long are these permits active? Say if a guy goes out there, punches a hole in the ground, he hits water, caps it for further use later on in history. When is the drop dead date on that? When it reverts back to the USGS?
Oh, well, I won't say none of these wells, but none of that that right to drill a well or that permit is part of USGS. The state owns the rights to all the water. In fact, it's right in the state constitution. It says the state owns the water. So if somebody drills a well for domestic use, all they're required to do is submit a permit that, hey, I drilled a well, and it's right here, and this is what I've got in it. As far as a water right, there's certain requirements that require a water right. If you drill a rural water system well that's going to service X number of people, you have to get a permit to use that water. Municipal wells are required permits. If you're going to withdraw water over a certain amount, then you're required a permit. For domestic wells, a lot of times you're not required a permit because it's just your household and you're going to pump less than what the state requirement is for withdrawal.
So it's basically all commercial.
Permits are, yes. Mm-hmm. These dots represent every driller's log that was given, that was reported to the state. So a good majority of permitted water is for a rural water system, for a municipal water system, or for a large withdrawal.
So we don't know how many holes are drilled in.
Well, that's correct.
People that got your permit,
yeah,
you know where they're at. People that just went out and drilled a hole for
right.
non-commercial use or for private use, you have no idea it even exists.
If a licensed driller drilled that well, their state requires them to submit a permit.
But if you don't have a license, you're not required.
That would be true.
Joanne, you had more? Or
Most, well, I would say 99.9% of wells that are drilled since the 1970s have been drilled by licensed well drillers. And those licensed well drillers are required to submit a well log to our water rights department. It's not meaning that they need a permit to do that.
That's a good point.
The well driller has to do that for the owner. Now, to get a water permit or a water right, that's an entirely different set of rules, and that's what Bill was talking about. That's more stringent on how much water is being used, whether it's a development, a municipality, rural water, commercial.
So
But
that-
a private homeowner generally has a well driller, and that well driller has to be licensed.
So if a well is 840 feet deep, static water level is 150 feet, it's a 4-inch casing or whatever, that all goes down to well log, that drill log?
Yes.
As far
That's
as how
correct.
it's
Yep, that would be in
installed,
that drill log. And those black dots are representing the drill logs that have filed by the state.
Quite a
Thank
few
you.
of those wells are actually in Precambrian rock, aren't they?
They are, correct. So the Madison and Minnelusa aquifers are that purplish area. It's you have the center of the Black Hills that it's just north of the Wind Cave area. And then there's a light blue rim around that Precambrian area, and then there's a darker purple. So that lighter green shade is the Madison, and that purplish shade is the Minnelusa, where it outcrops, where it pops up above the land surface. The green is the Indian Cara. Any other questions? All right, next down arrow. So for this particular model, we were interested in constructing a regional groundwater model, and that red outline on the map on the right is the area that the model was to cover. And what we want to do is utilize a lot of the data from the Black Hills Hydrology Study, which is a series of studies completed in about the mid-1990s. In fact, the West Dakota Water Development District funded a great deal of that, and it helped characterize a lot of the local aquifers. And it's a very, very, the products they produced, I think a lot of you might even have the atlas that came from that, the big atlas. It's very useful for drillers and for homeowners to see, or developers, to see what kind of water resources are available in the areas they're interested. So this model, we limited it to, there's many aquifers in the Black Hills region, but we were concerned or focused on the Madison and Minnelusa because those are the two most used aquifers in the area. Both of them, Madison is a limestone aquifer. A lot of the caves, if you go down to Wind Cave or Jewel Cave, you're climbing through the Madison aquifer. Minnelusa, a little bit younger, sits right on top of it, and it's also composed of limestone and some sandstones and things. And we get a lot of our water resources from there. In fact, all the water wells that supply, Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, the water wells that supply Rapid City are either coming from inflow galleries from Rapid Creek or they're Madison or Minnelusa wells. So, next slide. So I talked about this a little bit, but the concept of the model is to really consider where the Minnelusa aquifer, like I was talking about before, that kind of light green, and that Madison aquifer, the darker blue, the center of the Black Hills uplifted those two strata of rock. And where they're exposed, which is where all the arrows are on the left, water such as from precipitation or from a stream that runs across those aquifers, that supplies water to those aquifers directly. That water kind of flows down along how the strata of the rock is, and what we call recharges those aquifers. So aerial recharge is a fancy name for precipitation or rain. And you could also have a stream run across there, and I have some pictures of that and where it provides water into the aquifer. And then what's really neat about those two aquifers, then all the geology above it act as what we call a confining layer. So it's a little bit like holding a garden hose up. If you poured water in a garden hose and the end of the garden hose was capped and you kept pouring water in it and it kind of filled up, then you poked a hole in the garden hose later on, that water is going to squirt up and elevate out of that hose, and that's very, very similar to what our aquifer is. But if I punch a lot of holes in that garden hose, eventually that water pressure is going to go down. All right, next slide, please. So how this numeric groundwater model works is it's all about little cells, and I'll talk about these little cells here in a minute. And what the model does is it looks at a cell to the left and it looks at a cell to the right. It sees how different the water levels are between those two cells, as well as how well water can transmit between the cells, and it figures out the water level in that center cell. And it iterates that process over and over again for all the different cells in the groundwater flow model. And so things that can affect the water level in an aquifer as well as in the model are hydraulic conductivity, how much storage that cell can take, as well as inflows and outflows. So inflows, I could have a little cell in the model, could be precipitation or rain. Outflows could be well withdrawals. And that will all affect that little water level, which is represented by that line in that little triangle. And so I'll talk about some of these components in the next couple slides. And I only have about 12 slides, so I won't keep you here too long. Next slide, please. So I was talking about those little cells. So the model that we developed had 5 layers to it. So we had 2 layers in the Madison Aquifer, 2 in the Minaloosa, and then 1 layer representing that Precambrian dam that you were talking about. And we went from the years 1980 to 2010 in annual steps. So like all the precipitation, all the stream flow, we calculated an average for each year and put that in the model. And the reason I'm showing you this a little bit towards the end, I'll show you there's some new tools that we have that can actually make this a little bit better. Go ahead, Nikki.
So what is a layer?
A layer is a row of cells. So like I had on that slide
all at the
before.
Same depth?
No, not necessarily in the same depth. They can all change and be at different altitudes. But how the model works is each one of those cells, it calculates the water level to the left and to the right, to the front and to the back, and to the top and to the bottom. And so it is looking to see how all those cells are connected in a layer. There's some new modeling methods that make layering obsolete by just telling the model, hey, cell A, you're connected to all these cells around, so you don't care as much about layers. So in this case, in this model, the layers represent the Madison Aquifer and the Minaloosa Aquifer and the geology beneath it.
So, Bill,
Yes.
do the cells, are they tailored to follow the aquifer
Yes,
contour? Okay.
exactly. Yep, and each block then would follow that, and it becomes an important part of the model is how high up those are, because that goes to the
Okay,
water
so
level.
what are we looking at here? We're
Okay,
looking
yeah,
down?
great point. So this is how I had to divide up that bigger area, remember in the red triangle? And so it's finer where the black hills are and coarser on the outside. And then the areas that aren't there, this is like a look at the layer of the Madison Aquifer. That's where the Madison Aquifer doesn't exist. And so we're really focused on the Black Hills area, so that's why it's much finer grid resolution there.
How far out does that go? How far out from the Black Hills?
Yeah, it's about 120 so miles away from the Black Hills, and the reason we wanted to do that is because the boundaries, remember how I said there's one cell over here that has a certain water level, and you have to kind of assign that outside boundary a water level. And if we did that really close to the Black Hills, we might get some inaccuracies near the Black Hills, so we went way far out and made those cells out there. And then by the time the water gets to the Black Hills, the model can stabilize it and represent the true water level.
So on the west side, is that because there's Madison comes out of the Bighorn?
That's right. Yep.
Is that like where and travels north? Right?
That's right. And I've got a chart of that in a bit. But yeah, you're right. So out of the Bighorns as well as the Laramie Mountains, the Madison outcrops there, and it receives water there. Yep. And that's a big source of recharge. And that water does flow from west to east. I'll show how the model did that. Okay, go ahead.
Do the two aquifers leak between each
Do
other?
they interchange? Yes, they do. And the model can represent that. Yep. In different parts of the Black Hills.
Bighorn Springs, for example.
Yep, they do interchange. Not everywhere, but at a good, especially near the Black Hills, they do. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I mentioned, remember we looked at that little block and we had inflows and outflows to each one of the little cells. Well, one of the inflows I mentioned is precipitation. And what we can do is we have ways to represent precipitation, and that's shown on the right. And we take the precipitation, what we're really interested in is not just the rainfall, but how much of that rainfall gets into the aquifer itself. And that's what we call recharge. And that map on the right there shows areas of how many inches, average inches per year of precipitation makes it into the aquifer at those locations. And how much water infiltrates into the aquifer directly is a factor of many things. what's the soil cover, what's the vegetation there, because plants will take that rainwater boom and pull it right back out and send it out to the atmosphere. So obviously, though, where the precipitation is highest, you get the most recharge to the aquifers there. So up about near Lead and Deadwood, that's the darker blue. And then in the southern part of the Black Hills and over by Rapid City, we have lower average annual recharge there. And so overall, how much does precipitation contribute to averaging a recharge? About 227 cubic feet per second, about 150 to Madison, and 77 to the Minnelusa. So precipitation, snow, rain, and all that, that's how much water roughly gets into those two aquifers on average. Nathan, go ahead.
What's that hole
on the graph on the right? Yeah, and I should have done a better job of explaining that. So the Madison and Minnelusa, like if you drive up Nemo Road or Sheridan Lake Road, you'll drive through big limestone outcrops. And you can see another great one at the Great Wall just by Cleghorn Springs. That is a big Madison outcrop. And that, when those are exposed, that's where rain and river water can go right into the aquifer. But in the center, where the Black Hills is kind of peaked up, so like Black Elk Peak and all that, those Madison and Minnelusa aquifers have eroded away. So they are not present in the center. So a lot of pictures of the Black Hills, when we talk about the Madison and Minnelusa, we're showing where that's exposed, so where those aquifers can grab water and stream water. And then in the center, there is no limestone there. It's all Precambrian rock. In fact, you drive up like Rockerville, you'll see a lot of the schists, and as you keep driving up towards Harney Peak, you get into the granites and things. So you won't see those limestones anymore. Dan?
How do you determine that? Is that by surface area, or how much water actually goes into the
Yeah, exactly. So we used a soil water balance model that takes precipitation, soil type, vegetation, land cover, and then it calculates how much, again, it's done by cells, how much infiltration into the aquifers each cell can take, and then we clipped out the Precambrian and said, okay, in this area, that's the amount of recharge roughly that it gets. Okay, next slide.
So I get a,
Sure, go ahead.
So the holes, does that imply that wells generally would not be viable in those areas?
No, in fact, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. You can still drill holes in the Precambrian rock. It's very fractured. It's a granite and schist, and so it's fractured, and those fractures can collect water. So, for instance, Custer, Dan, jump on if I get any of these wrong. Custer has, like a lot of their wells are in this Precambrian rock.
That's true.
It's hit or miss with that type of rock, though. It's really difficult to know if you're going to get a productive well out of that type of rock.
That's true.
Bedrock shaped like a bowl. You got to hit the water in the bowl, or else you don't get nothing.
Yeah, that happens.
Bill?
Yes.
So the model, your model, this is like a pre-analysis model to determine what goes into your model.
That's
so
right.
This isn't part of what you're doing.
It is part, and it was some of the funding West Dakota Water Development District went to do that model on the right. That's right. Because we kind of need that to know. And then the bigger groundwater model can actually calibrate that. It'll raise that recharge number up and down to make other things match. It's almost a model within a model. Okay, next slide.
What's going on here?
Must be somebody's giving me the hook.
Try the mouse.
Oh, great. Okay,
My
so
buttons quit working for some reason.
so this I mentioned earlier, as some of the, not only do these aquifers receive water from precipitation, but also as streams run across those exposed areas of the aquifer. So again, on the right, you see that light blue being the Madison, that kind of light bluish gray, and then that darker blue, or I guess lighter blue, is the Minnelusa. And so what we had to do is we had to calculate using stream gauge information in those little triangles with the little numbers by them, like 064, 07500, are all different stream gauges that we have along the streams. What we had to do is that we could get stream flow upstream of the aquifer and downstream of the aquifer, and you look at the stream flow at both those stream gauges and you subtract it, and then you can get how much of that stream water, we call it, was lost into the aquifer itself. So those little green dots along there are points that we selected in the model to be injection points for this stream flow into the model. So our model not only includes, like you were asking, the precipitation input, but also this is how we modeled the stream flow. And so that picture on the lower left there is an example along Beaver Creek where you can see there's a stream behind that guy, and then there's nothing upstream. And that's an area loss zone where that stream flow is directly going into the aquifer and it's recharging the aquifer.
That's one of those green sites, the green.
Oh yes, yep,
Okay.
yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah,
it's-
that's depicted by one of the green dots there, and we did 4 green dots, one for each of those 4 layers that we have represented. So it's injecting water directly into the aquifers.
Were you able to find where the dye was coming out?
I don't remember for this particular one. That was done by a National Park Service just inside the park or just outside along Beaver Creek, and I don't recall for that one where the dye came out. There have been a lot of dye tests along Box Elder Creek near Doty Springs, and that's like a old project that's been done by the School of Mines for years and years, although they haven't done it in probably the last decade or so, where they'll put rhodamine dye into Doty Springs, and then you can go to the wells in Rapid City and pull samples out of the wells, and you'll get minute traces of that dye, and so you know how quickly it flows. In fact, it usually takes about a day to get from Doty Springs to Rapid City wells.
Yeah.
Is that time?
I actually, I got my master's degree from School of Mines and I worked with Dr. Manning. We did a dye test then, that was in 1976. And so doing the same thing you were saying, but then well number 6, which is up in Wilderness Park.
RC6, yeah.
And it took 33 days.
Oh, did it? Yeah.
33 days to show up at that well site from the lost zone up on Box Elder Creek. So it's pretty short.
Yes, it is. That's why our water quality is really good, by the way. We're drinking a lot of rainwater and river water that just goes into the aquifer for a short amount of time. I like to say gets kissed by the limestone, so you get a little bit of flavor to it. And then, boom, you're drinking it right in Rapid City. In fact, Rapid City, correct me if I'm wrong, really all they do to treat the water is chlorinate it to kill bacteria.
And fluoride, yeah.
And fluoride, which has been cut back recently, too. So, okay. Next slide. And this goes to, I think, Dan's question. There we go. So one of the other inputs to the model on the very boundaries is there is flow into the Madison that comes into that model. And that big blue swath kind of to the left is the Bighorn Mountains that Dan was talking about, so where those great big black arrows are coming out of. So water in this region hits the Madison Aquifer in that Wyoming area. It also hits it, like I just showed you, in and around the Black Hills area. And the water flows from west to east. And then the Black Hills, it kind of wraps around and goes out a little bit to the west, and then wraps to the south of the Black Hills and a little bit to the north of the Black Hills, and then flows to the Madison way out towards the east side. So that's kind of regionally how the Madison, and the Minnelusa does the same thing. They both flow like that regionally. And I'll show you how the model kind of captures that here in a second. So next slide. Okay, so we talked about the inflows for rain and for stream flow, and those collecting those data sets takes a long time. We have a couple people that worked on it over about a year's time to just collect that data and check it and make sure it's right, as well as some of it we collect from the parks. So some of the funding went to actually collect stream flow data out there. So the outflows, what comes out of those cells, one of them is springs. And these were the springs that were modeled in the model itself. The ones with black dots are where we don't really, they're not named. We just know that they're there. They've been mapped. We don't have a lot of information on them other than their location. And the ones with the little tadpole symbol are springs that we have a lot of data for. And so there's a part in the model where we compare what the model said that spring flow is with what our measured spring flow is too. So some stream gauges that we have out there, these streams are fed by springs, and so these stream gauges are able to measure how healthy is that spring flow. And that spring flow is directly related to how much water is in the aquifers. And our total spring flow that we calculated was about 189 cubic feet per second. So, next slide. And then, of course, another outflow is well withdrawals. And what these two maps show, the red line is the outline of the model. So, Dan, you were asking about why did we throw those boundaries way out where we did. And that was keep it away from the Black Hills, but as well as capture that water that's flowing in regionally from the Laramie and from the Bighorn Mountains. Each one of those little dots up there just represents cubic feet per day, a relative value of withdrawals. The blue is the Madison, and the pink there is Minnelusa. And so you can see, obviously, where most well withdrawals are occurring: Rapid City, or in the Madison, Rapid City, Hot Springs, Spearfish, and then a few of those larger dots out there are usually irrigation permits. And then the Minnelusa you can see there on the right, too. So total well withdrawals is about 27 cubic feet per second for this region.
What's the city in Gillette doing? You know?
In fact, we were just updating Gillette. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but we were looking at that. So they have one of the only counties, too, when we were doing this, that has withdrawals for mining from the Madison and Minnelusa. Okay, next slide. Almost there. So we took all this data and we placed it in our model, and then we had to do some calibration. So part of the calibration is to have the model where all those little points are and where all those circles are to figure out how well does that rock conduct water? What is the hydraulic conductivity doing? So we did that for the 2 layers of the Madison and 2 layers of the Minnelusa, and then it calculates a value and then interpolates that value and gives us a good idea of what the conductivity is of the aquifer. And I think, Mike, you were asking me, well, did you discover, or maybe Bob, did you discover anything from the model? One thing that was kind of interesting is the model would have these areas of really high hydraulic conductivity. In other words, where water should just scream through it. And we thought, what would cause that? And it could be areas where there could be a potential for caves. And so some of the caves did show up, like Wind Cave and Jewel Cave, but we had these other areas around the Black Hills where water was supposed to transmit very quickly through there, and it could be an area where there could be additional caves, much like Wind Cave or Jewel Cave. Okay, next slide. Okay, and this goes to that regional water flow a little bit to Dan, your question. So on the left is the Madison Aquifer, and the blue lines are what the model showed how water from the Madison Aquifer flowed. And again, we have that west to east trend. The lines with the contours on it are what the water level is there. And then in the kind of shaded gray is what our maps told us that it was. And it's a little bit busy, but the key thing is if the model, and I know, Nathan, I put some of these in there because you had mentioned about, hey, how do you grade how well a model performs, right? You'd asked about that a lot before. One way is the water flow direction about right? So for us, do I have this trend from west to east for the Madison and Minnelusa? And do I have the center of the Black Hills get water? And does that water go a little bit to the west and then bend around to the east? And our model was able to replicate that regionally. So qualitatively, this was a good thing to have happen. Next slide.
Are those numbers in feet?
They are. Those are all feet in elevation. That's correct. So if you see a number, for instance, on the right there in the center by the core of the Black Hills. Oh, and again, remember, there's nothing in the middle because the Madison and Minnelusa are both eroded from there. That's your pre-Cambrian core, your Black Elk Peak and Rockerville and all that. So like the water level in the Madison, kind of near the Black Hills, actually Minnelusa, about 5,800 feet. And then you can see it drops off as you get away from the Black Hills. I think you were asking about, does it follow the topography of the aquifer? And it does a little bit, but there's areas where it's higher pressure, like I was saying with the garden hose, where that, even though the top of my garden hose might be the Madison aquifer, I get the water squirting up pretty high out of that. And there's areas of that high pressure. In fact, near Sioux Park, RC12 or 6?
RC9 is the
positive pressure.
Yeah, and so is well number 5.
Well 5, that's what I'm thinking.
The
RC5.
Senior Citizen Center.
That's right. So some of the wells that our city uses.
They're about 30 pounds each time.
Yes, yep. Sometimes up to 40 or 50 feet ahead. So if we uncap that well, it's a Madison well, it would shoot up maybe 30 or 40 feet. Okay, next slide. Okay, Nathan, again, I was thinking about you and I was putting these slides together, like how good is your model? So What those dots represent is if I went out to every well and I measured the water level in it, or the average water level, if I had a whole bunch, and compared that to what I modeled on the left side, if they were exactly right, they would all plot along a 1-to-1 line, right? So I would have measured 2,500 or 4,000 feet. The model said 4,000 feet, that's perfect. Well, of course, the model's not perfect, but after calibration, we tried to get those dots to hug that 1-to-1 red line. And so before we calibrated, you can see where the blue dots are a little bit scattered around. But after calibration and adjusting those hydraulic connectivities at all the different cells, it kind of brought it in a little bit better towards the center line. And so you can kind of look numerically like how much of a difference did you have? That's that average mean residual. And notice that went down, but it's not perfect. And then the root mean square is, well, if you don't count pluses and minuses, how much did that difference come down between somebody that went out and measured that well with the tape and somebody that looked at the model and saw what the water level was. So that's one way that we measure how well the model's performing, is how close is it to that 1-to-1 line. Although your question, Nathan, you did bring up, like you gave out a percentage one time, well, is your model this percent accurate? That got us really thinking about how to turn this kind of complex diagram into a simpler number for groundwater models. For stream flow, it's a little bit simpler. But how could we change that into a single percentage number and try to meet a target like you mentioned? We haven't figured that out yet, but it made us think about it. Yes?
So is this a snapshot at a certain, are all these data at the same time?
This is an average water level. So if I had a well with multiple water levels, take the average of that. Have the model do the same thing, take the average of that.
Okay. Is the average over several years?
Yeah, it depends on how much water data you have, but 1980 to 2015.
I'd say that's excellent.
It's not bad. If you ever see a model where it's all on the 1-to-1 line, there's probably some professors in here who'd be like, yeah, that's scary because something's not right there. But that's not too bad. Next slide.
You got a question, Nathan, on this?
Sure.
So the blue dots on there, those are your model?
That was pre-calibration, so before we put it through a calibration process.
Okay,
how was the scatter?
What was your calibration process? So you're comparing actual?
Yes, yeah, and that's a good question. So we used it's called PEST, Parameter Estimation Software, and what it does is every one of those cells, or where those points were that I showed in a map, it adjusts how well that rock can move water. And then what it tries to match is I give it water levels at all these different locations, or I give it a stream flow, or both, and it tries to match those by changing that hydraulic connectivity.
So you're adjusting the hydraulic conductivity to
rock.
match real world
water levels.
Measured
You got
values.
it. Yep. It's easier to explain than do, oddly enough. But okay, next slide. We did the same. Remember, I talked about spring flow, so we did the same with spring flow. Took the average spring flow, and then tried to walk those dots closer to that line. That it's actually a 1-to-1 line, but the axes are a little bit skewed. And you can see before pre-calibration, we had springs all over the place. And then again, by adjusting that hydraulic connectivity where the springs are, we're able to bring them back down. But modeling spring flow is really, really tough. And you can see where that mean residual, 8 CFS is quite a bit for some of our springs around here. So that's kind of a larger error. And we're trying to think about how to better do that. And I got about another 2 or 3 slides, and I'll talk about some of the ideas that we have for that. So same concept, Nathan, like you asked about the water levels and that you asked, but just applied to spring flow. Now, there's not a lot of dots on there because we don't have a lot of spring flow information in the Black Hills. We know that a spring is there, but nobody's measured the flow. Next slide. Okay, and one last way that we kind of measure how well a model does is we take all these different wells. There's 81 of them. I'm not going to show all 81. This is just an example. And then over time, I think you were asked about this, like what's the water level at these different wells over time? And then compare that with what the model spit out. Some wells do really well, like Chapel Lane, a Minna Lisa well down at the lower left did pretty well, but others don't do as well. That RG well that's also in the Minna Lisa in the center column midway down didn't do as well. So in these big regional models, Nathan, some areas of the model will perform better than others sometimes.
You know, we drilled those wells in the early 90s, Madison wells for the city.
Yes.
And that was at the end of the drought. 92,
Right, that's
93,
right.
94, it started raining again. Do you know what, you knew what the static level was at that time. Is it, do you know where that is in reference to when they were drilled? Are they
I
higher
don't.
today, or-
It fluctuates quite a bit. We USGS, the city asks us to monitor. It's about 8 different wells that we look at that are all very close to the production wells, and it goes pretty cyclical based on drought and good, high precipitation times.
I was curious if they were higher now than when you drilled them.
I would have to look compared to when they're drilled. Usually it's for what we have data for.
That was at the end of the drought.
Right, in the early 90s. Yeah. And they've kind of gone up and come down. So I think the last time I pulled the data, where we're at right now is just right at about average, believe it or not, from all the rain that we've gotten. I'd expected it to be a little bit higher.
Well, some people were concerned that we were going to draw it down by pumping 5,000 acre feet out of it.
Right.
So,
which you do. I'll show an example of that here.
So anyway, I was just curious how that aquifer was holding up, pumping that much water out of it.
Right, and the Madison and Lucia in the Rapid City area are doing pretty well still.
Okay.
So still a lot of the wells are under positive pressure, not as much as they were, but they're still doing okay. Next slide. Okay, well here's the scenario, and this is just one more slide after this. So Dan was asking about this a little bit. So one of the other things you can do with a model is do a pumping scenario, and one of the things, for example, the city might ask is, hey, Rapid City well number 13, which is right kind of in the center of that graphic. You can see it about over to the left where it says RC13. There's a little black dot there, and then there's a blue 13 by it. What happens if we pump that thing at 450 gallons per minute for 30 years? What would happen to the other wells nearby? For instance, RC12. And RC12, you can see, is just a little bit to the right of that. Well, what the model will do is you can run it for that amount of time and then contour what the drawdown was. How many feet did the water level decline in the Madison over those different distances? And so for this example, RC12, and this is, again, Dan, just an example, it would draw down about 13 feet over that period of time. And then the little graphic on the left shows that water jumped down really quickly, so within a year it would jump down, and then it would stay at about that level with constant pumping. So we've done a lot of pumping scenarios for the city of Rapid City, also for the National Park Service using other models, and that's kind of what this would be designed to do too. So last slide. Boy, I'm really going to get the hook now. So I mentioned earlier that we did have other cooperators besides the West Dakota Water Development District for this, and they've asked, both the City of Rapid City and the Park Service has asked for a few model refinements, and we're hoping to finish these by the end of 2019. One way to increase the accuracy of what the springs are doing is to have a finer grid. And just over the last couple of years, they developed a system where you don't have to have your grid squares all the same size anymore, which was a limitation when we first built this model. And so, for example, you can see like Rapid City there, I can make that a very, very fine grid and get better contours and get better information there. USGS has put out a new algorithm that calculates that water level, like I showed in that earlier slide with the different water levels. It's a little bit more efficient and easier to update, and so we've already transitioned this model over to that. I'd also like to update the pumping and the records through 2017. Look at that structure like you were talking about for the aquifers. It's pretty good right now, but some new software's come out to make it even finer, so we can fill in those little fine squares with that. I talked about the calibration software. It has an update too. And then last is all of our models, USGS has just put out a new requirement within the last year and a half that they all have to be documented and archived a certain way. It used to not be that way. It used to be you could create these models for West Dakota Water Development District and they sat on our share drive until somebody asked about them. But now they have to all be posted online. And so that is a new requirement, and we're going to do that for this model, so it'll be at a website and you can pull it up and look at it any time, or somebody could download it and put in pumping scenarios for themselves. So these little tweaks we want to make over the next year and get this final product out to the city, out to the National Park Service. And that's all I have. I really busted my timeline, though. I apologize.
Good
Yeah.
job. So you said that somebody could download this and input their own pumping scenario, so you're going to have available, the model will be available.
Yes. Yep. So,
online.
yep, you bet, and fully documented. We have to work through that new process over the next year and make sure it's good to go.
And that's what you're calling it, the mod flow?
Yes, that's the name of the software that is the latest release to do the calculation.
So what would somebody need? Do they need some kind of driver software to drive your model? Or?
No, in fact, we're just finishing archiving one of these. In fact, Galen was helping us out with it. It's all self-contained, and you just download the zip drives. It comes with instructions like unzip this, this, and this. It even describes all the files. So like your well file will look like this. You just go in there, put in your row and column, and assign it a pumping rate. Eventually, what the USGS would like to do is, we always joke around, you can go onto Amazon and in 2 or 3 clicks you could buy something, right? But to use one of these models, it can be very complex. Someday we would like to integrate a lot of these models where you can just go online and 2 or 3 clicks, put in your pumping scenario and see what the drawdown would be or what your impact would be.
Because with a model this complicated, in the wrong hands, it could be dangerous.
That's a great point.
Somebody in some city was trying to make decisions based on.
That's correct. Yep.
So to meet your study goals or objectives, do you think?
Yeah, I think so, but when you build these models, it seems like you're never satisfied, right? Like I wasn't really happy with the stream flow outcome, and so it's like, wow, if I just integrate some of these newer things, then I think it would be a much, much better model. And then you have competing goals too. So like the National Park Service wants their area really refined, and you've got Rapid City. Okay, we want our area really, really refined around Rapid City, and then other places aren't. So
in the future, they'll be able to use some mechanism to make a finer grid.
Yes, correct. And even there's a mechanism to combine adjacent models that other people have done into one gigantic model of the Madison Aquifer, if you wanted. So,
Are they doing any work over there in the Powder River Basin, similar to what you're doing?
I haven't heard of anything from Wyoming or Montana on that, but it would be interesting. Yes.
So I have a question on the inflow modeling that you showed earlier. That's obviously not static. You've got climate changes, and is that determined by sensors, rainfall gauges, and snow gauges, and when the snow's melting and things like that?
Correct. Yeah. So that model takes all that into account. We call it a soil-water balance model, but it takes the inputs. You feed it climate, the minimum and maximum temperature of each day, the precipitation of each day, the snowfall amount of each day. You can even hand it wind speeds and evaporation things. And so it can go through every day.
And somebody using this model wouldn't worry about that. That's something you guys take care of at the front end.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You wouldn't need that in the model. No. You wouldn't need to adjust it. Yes.
You know, I see you put a lot of work in here, and you put a lot of your wells and so on, the positions of them, and what's your chances of inducing contaminants in these wells?
Well, that's a good question too, and there's been a lot of studies by the School of Mines on aquifer vulnerability, right, where those areas of the Madison are exposed, such as along Nemo Road over at the Great Wall across from Cleghorn Springs, and that is an area of concern. For instance, if you had a massive chemical spill on one of these outcrops in those areas, we know how quickly it flows, or I guess you were talking about how quickly it can flow through the aquifer and be in the city water supply.
There was a gas tanker that tipped over there, right there by Norris Peak Road. And got into Box Elder Creek. It's going to be 33 days, and it'll be at well number 6. And if that happens, the city knows that, and they probably would shut that well down. They would not be using that well until it cleared out of it. And it's the same way coming down Rapid Creek. There's 20-some CFS are lost in that canyon.
That's about right. Yeah.
Well, part of that water comes to Cleghorn Springs, Jackson Springs, well number 9 in Meadowbrook Golf Course. I mean, it affects the city's water supply. So there's some vulnerability there if something like that would happen.
It's like the information come through here once before on the other side of Nemo, where the water goes directly into the ground.
That's what we're talking about.
And they don't know where it goes to.
Yeah,
And it can contaminate the whole city.
Well, they do kind of know where it's going. I don't know if it would affect Black Hawk water system or not, but the USGS did a lot of work with the city of Rapid City back in the 90s using oxygen isotope tracers, like well number 9, which is at Meadowbrook. There's water actually coming in there from Spring Creek. There's water coming from Rapid Creek. And by measuring the different types of oxygen isotopes. So who would have thought that there was Spring Creek water coming all the way over to Meadowbrook Golf Course? But it does. So this kind of information is extremely valuable.
And I think we had one of the slides showed those flow paths of the water. And it's not necessarily, contaminant might not exactly follow those flow paths. Contaminants can disperse and they can degrade. But it was the one with all the blue lines and gray lines. So,
The concentration is probably less, like you said.
It disperses. But that's
diluted down, but
that's
still
how we think that groundwater flows. And we have
there was quite a bit of work done. Earl Green and Andy Long and some of the other staff members down there did a lot of work just around Rapid City back in the late 90s to develop that Madison aquifer.
That's right. For the city. Yep.
So there's a lot of good information there.
James, did you have something?
Yeah. You said the water behaved differently around the caves. Did it flow through it faster or around it?
Faster through those cells.
Okay, so you identified some areas that might
we were trying to figure out why would that be, right? Why did the model calibrate to this really fast?
Either open aquifer or a cave.
Yep, like an opening. Yep.
Well, number 9, this is at Meadowbrook. We hit a driller hit a cave there, timber drilling. It's probably 8 or 9 foot in depth, in height. I don't know how wide it is.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And we got the drill bit stuck in there. Had a heck of a time getting it out. But that well flowed 1,800 gallon a minute.
Yeah, they're very productive. And that's why there's a lot of people drilling wells into the Madison aquifer along the perimeter of the Black Hills.
You just won't know until you drill a hole.
Well, I was just going to say, do we need to, are we going to, is there anything that we have to vote on?
Oh, no, I should have mentioned that at the beginning. I'm sorry. No, it's just a report.
It's just follow on from prior funding. So
yes, correct.
Very interesting.
That's very good information.
I'm looking at our agenda right now, and I'm seeing that it's pretty long.
I know, I apologize. That's my fault.
Is there anything more?
No vote needed on this. It's just a question exchange.
So we can wrap it up?
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, Bill.
She gave me the ultimate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Bill. Agenda item number 8. I see Jason Phillips, Tony Broomer present. Another update. We voted on this one already, too.
Okay, thank you.
This one's been funded.
Ours is a little bit longer.
We have prettier pictures.
Where's the donut?
That means that doesn't mean that you're staying till the end of the whole thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
You'll be here as long as we are tonight.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to lock the door.
I don't know. Tony's got an assistant who probably has a curve.
And I didn't go to Hawaii and spend your guys' money, so that's a good thing.
Well, that must have been worth it.
Yep, that's it. My name's Tony Broom. I'm from Rapid City Regional Airport, and I just want to thank the board very much for the support of this project. This was a new project for us. Jason actually came and presented to the airport board about a year ago at this time, this concept for the green roof. We had done a green roof with our renovation in 2012, and for some reason the thing failed. Well, he could probably tell you a whole lot more about that than I could. So what we did is we just threw together some pictures for you at the start of the project and walking through it. And if you've got questions, of course, that would be Jason's area. But the first thing they had to do is they had to come out onto our patio and remove how many tons of rock? Just tons. It was quite a process. So you can, go ahead and arrow down for us there. And And, you know, they had to do this by hand. It was very challenging because they're up on a roof. Yeah, and you can just keep going through these. This is just showing this initial part. And this is what they had to do. They had to then carry it over and dump it into that loader there and take it away. So then after they got done with all the rock, if you want to hold on for just a second here, Jason can kind of explain what this is here in the pavers. That's where your irrigation system went?
Yep.
Okay.
So we got the level all set to accommodate for the trays. Were 4-inch trays with the green roof and the soil all coming in. And so with the slope of that roof underneath there, would, you know, in some areas we took out 6 to 8 inches of that P-rock, in some areas, you know, 2 to 3 on the higher slopes underneath all these pavers. So then we removed all the pavers around to put all the irrigation zones in.
Go ahead.
They don't, being up on the roof, the flow wasn't all that great. It was right around 5 gallons a minute. So we ended up with, what do we have, 10?
Stop here.
You can go ahead and go
10,
one
11,
more.
12 zones.
Yeah.
So there's some of the irrigation.
Here's where you're
So there's the
putting it.
lines.
I'm
and,
going to go back one. Sorry.
showing just how we had to route through. So all the irrigation is routed through underneath the pavers. And then instead of doing it in the beds in case there's any issues in the green roof system itself, we drilled holes through the edging around and then ran swing pipe. You can see right down in the corner we ran swing pipes into each head. So if there's any issues, all the irrigation is outside of the green roof and accessible to underneath the pavers there.
So this all had to be done in advance of the plants. The plants were actually ordered, I believe, in April, and they grew them in Minnesota and got them started and growing, and then they brought them out. So that's the next slide. Again, this was another challenge. Here's the truck coming in with all what they call a hoppet of the plants. You can keep going. This just gives you a little bit. Go ahead.
I had a question. Now, the South Dakota winter, are these lines clean just or blown out just like typical sprinkler heads? So in the fall they blow out the lines for the roof and for the lawn.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Well, we're going to be. We have our own compressor for this system that they're putting in their compactor garage, and so there's going to be a compressor dedicated to blowing this out. So if we have to water in the winter, if it gets, you know, our 3-4 weeks of 60-degree weather, and that 4 inches of soil doesn't take much to dry out in such a well-drained soil. So if we have to water in the winter, then we have a compressor right there that we could blow out that system after we're done watering that right after it. So.
All right.
And there again, the challenge was getting everything up onto the roof. So we had this loader that would then lift up the whole, 4 or 5 sets of those plants, put them up on the lift or on the roof. The guys that were out there, the green team, along with Jason, they had to unload them all. This was, I think, 2 days it took them to get everything unloaded and onto the roof. Go ahead. And this is just them putting them in, and go ahead and we'll just give it a little bit more. And this is how it all came together, number of days. And so we're getting here close to the end where this is where we've got now the plants in every section out there on the roof. And I can tell you right now, the plants that are out there are loving this weather. They look fantastic. They're in great condition. The people that are looking at it, now wait, go back one more. This is probably what's of most important to you guys if you go back one more slide. Nope, one more. Back one more. Yep, the little weather station, or the big weather station.
They've
number 21. Yeah, get to 21 there.
They've
there
successfully
we go.
Went through the 70-mile-an-hour windstorm.
Yes.
So I was out there
yes.
sitting there watching them, waiting for stuff to start blowing off. We didn't have any wind erosion, no loss of plants. Everything held up as good as it's getting. So it's
just good because it's getting that north wind.
We'll see when it hits 100.
Yeah. So
plants in soil or in trays? Trays with soil in them.
Yep.
Plants are in trays.
Yep. So if you go back a few slides, you can see the.
Look like they're all in trays. There's no challenge for being root bound or anything like that.
Nope. So you can see right. So right here, these are sitting on the patio paver. So right here, these soil elevators. So the soil's 4 1/4 inches tall. And these trays are kind of go down, and so there's an inch or so of soil above those trays. So every row as we went through, so you see there's still the soil elevator here and here because we had to cut and put them in there. But as you lay those rows, you pull all those soil elevators out, and then it's soil to soil contact.
Okay.
So it becomes a monolithic roof once all those soil elevators are pulled out and the roots could horizontally disperse throughout the whole roof.
Okay. Yep. And then this is Jason and Dr. Benning. We are next Wednesday going to have a press conference or press event out on the patio. You're all welcome to come. We would love it if some of you could at least be there, as you are a partner on this project. So we'll be inviting the press. This is Dr. Benning from the School of Mines, who has been working with Jason on this project as well. And then our final slide is
What time was that?
Oh, sorry, I was going too fast. 10 o'clock, Wednesday morning, the 17th. And just if you come out, just park in the lot closest to the airport. We'll comp your parking. We'll stamp your ticket, bring your ticket in, and hopefully we'll get some good coverage out there on this.
Somebody, can
30 minutes is
anybody
free.
be there? 'Cause I
So if you go back one
I'd love to have
slide,
that, yeah.
This is interesting.
so that's
really
the
cool.
weather station. So that's a bulk of all the testing equipment that you guys paid for. And again, I thank you very, very much.
do.
Because this project would not be happening if you guys didn't fund it.
So is that automated due to the temperature and climate of the soil? It'll turn on the sprinklers, all that.
That's the end goal. I don't have all that set up right now. I just deployed this on Saturday.
Okay.
So none of that is up and going. This is up and running. It's collecting data. We could get on the web right now and look at it. It's all uploaded. So it collects data every 5 minutes, uploaded via cellular every 15. And then through HoboLink, we could get on and actively see it. So if you guys are interested, I could provide you the login and the password, and you guys could see it. Or I could come out here and do another demonstration as we go further along.
Take that to Dan, and the interested parties can contact Dan for that information. How's that sound?
Okay. So I have the tipping bucket covered because there's no heater. It's not a heated one, and so we didn't want it collecting moisture and freezing and stuff right now, but we wanted to just deploy it all and make sure it's working. So that's full. That RX 3000 has all the sensors it could have. Then there's going to be another one over on the other side of the roof with more additional soil moisture, soil temperature, some infrared sensors, stuff like that. So
You said you deployed it this last Saturday. Does that mean the weather station here?
Yep.
Or, good.
Yep.
When did the plants go in?
They went in. We started that on October 20th or September 20th.
September.
20th.
Yeah, so the project is definitely not completed. We started, everything was predicated on when the plants would arrive, and that date kind of kept changing and changing on us. So once we got that date, then that team, Jason's team, had to, jump together and get it all out there for us. But
So what kind of plants have you got planted?
They're all sedums. There's 7 different varieties of sedums that have been tested on rooftops and have shown
For
to
this area,
to survive the best. And then there's one around that sculpture. The Live Roof company is very engaged with us and involved with the research and to develop it even further. And so they provided some 6-inch trays at no cost with some different varieties of plants to kind of test it to see, how well they do, if, just to kind of get a broader range of plants versus just sedums, because it's going to be kind of a monoculture plant. There's 7 different types of sedums, but it's still sedum, so that the diversity isn't as diverse of having some grasses and other plants mixed in with it.
Will they choke out any like thistles?
Oh yeah, there's going to be maintenance, so we're going to be weeding it. So as weeds pop up, then you have to get them out of there and stuff. So
Is this area something the public accesses? Or?
Yep.
yes.
Yep.
We
There's
tip-
a
Don't
deck
allow
out
dogs.
there.
It's a deck, yep. And typically in the wintertime, we do close that off. Just we don't want people slipping and falling in any ice areas and things like that. We'll probably keep it open this winter on the nicer days, especially once we get all the signage in there that explains the project. And then we do plan on having the kiosk, which is a part of this grant as well. That'll actually be on the inside, we're thinking, for people to go up and interact and see what's actually going on with that project.
You wouldn't have any,
Railing to keep people off the grass.
well, no.
Oh yeah,
Well,
Doug's,
and we're
Doug's
on
been
that,
very
yeah.
adamant about-
Because I already imagine kids are
Yeah.
going to be stumped.
Oh, there's a
Yeah.
little kid the other day when we were deploying that station. Little kid come running out, and first thing they wanted to do is go get out on there, you know. And so
Now we are looking at installing some kind of a small little fence in there to try to keep people out. Yeah.
and it handles some. I mean, it handles some foot traffic. It's not like you just step on it, it's going to die. I mean, we've been trampling around
Yeah,
there to set all
airport
that up,
traffic.
you know.
So I was thinking more like field trips for educational purposes for kids.
That would be
If
great.
there's a way
Yeah.
to start something like that to get them interested in some of these.
You might want to consider a small area that just put Fiscus in there to take care of the kids. Something they can stomp on.
Border-
like a hurricane,
border
they
of it.
shoot off.
That is a good idea. We need things for kids to do out there when they're having to wait. That's for sure. So,
On the second floor, where the restaurant is, at the airport,
yes, yes.
on
So
the west side.
yeah, so it's on the
That's
pre-secured side, so anybody can
So
access
you can
it.
see right. The windows are huge. And you can just stay inside and get a really good view of it,
You can.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
and it adds to the ambience of the restaurant.
Yeah, thank you. We've heard nothing but positive comments about this, and it was so exciting when the truck pulled up and those guys got to work out there. It's been pretty nice project. So
For the longest time, people thought we were crazy because we were setting up an irrigation system. Looked like we were watering the rock. They're like, "What are you guys doing?"
So is the airport board can continue this when he moves on to his high-paying job somewhere?
yeah. Well, actually, because we do have an agreement with Jason, but our MOU, like with you, is with the School of Mines. So even when he moves on, we will still have support from the school. So yeah. And then the last slide just shows where we're at budget-wise, so you can see. Where your dollars have gone and what the airport has contributed to the project. So we've got, the $26,000 grant from you. There are still some things that need to be purchased. And then the airport has contributed about $55,000 for a total project of $81,000. And then if we run into any other contingencies, like we're talking about, if we need to put up that fencing or something, the airport's prepared to do that to protect this project. So thank you again very much. Thank you for the quick response on our press release. We wanted to make sure that the public knows that you supported this project as well, and
Appreciate that.
yeah, we want to get that out there. So next week we won't have all our signs in place, so it is still a work in progress, but we'll keep you posted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you guys have a logo?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Okay,
So do you have
I
my
can get
email?
that with you too.
I got Tony.
I got Dan.
Okay.
I-
So yeah, if you could get it to Tony,
Because
and then
make
we'll get
sure
it
that's
on the
our
sign.
signage as well too.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, thank you very much.
One more question, please.
Are you guys, as part of your study, going to be tracking energy costs associated with this? Are you?
I hope so. I don't know how we're gonna to do that because so we got sensors that I'm gonna layer on the surface, in the soil, beneath the tray and the P-rock, and then at the very bottom of the P-rock. And then my goal is to take readings on the inside. But the issue is that roof is open to the rental car area, that's open to the baggage claim area, and there's just this constant flux of people and doors opening. And I don't know how the airport handles
I'll have to check on
the
that.
bills. Like if we'd be able to see, all right, does the rental car have it separate from the rest of the airport?
The way to
I mean,
equalize
this
that
is 2,200 square feet of roof.
kilobtu's per square foot, and then Doug can run numbers off of that by his BTU consumption.
Well, I'm pretty sure we can.
Or
We've got
electrical,
so
gas,
many
et
meters
cetera.
out there. Everything is
Way
separately
that way.
metered. So I'll bet we could put something to that.
2,200 square feet, though, out of the whole entire airport, I don't think we're going to see much, to be honest. I'm being negative on my own research, but
But we'll look.
we're gonna look. You can see.
Compare that to cooling degree days and heating degree days. There's a there's some way to average that out and get some relative.
Yeah, and we are going to do like the thermal conductivity, and on the IR sensors, we're going to be able to see the temperature of that black roof that's behind there, and then the temperature of the green roof, and do some comparisons like that. But as far as heating, cooling savings for the airport, I think it'll be
Probably minimal.
difficult
Unless you can
to
monitor
see.
that specific area underneath it somehow.
I'm sure wet rock in the summer is a lot cooler than hot 120 degree rock.
Well, I'm really anxious. I'm really excited to come see that Wednesday.
Me
Good.
too.
I've looked through the window.
Yay. Thank you.
It looks really nice.
Another
Great.
question on Nathan, I think.
Yeah, well, it's just, one of those practical things that taxpayers want to know, what's the advantage of doing this? So I want to know that. Why are we doing this? Looks nice, great. We could have put some mosaic tile down that would have looked nice too. So why are we doing this? So energy
Oh, for sure.
savings.
Yeah, it's all going to be.
We,
Those are all the questions that we're going to definitely
Yeah.
try to answer.
yeah, good.
In the newscast,
Yeah.
Wednesday.
Wednesday. All right. Thank you.
Just check.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sometimes it's a good deal, sometimes it ain't.
I don't know.
We go to number 9. We have proposal for first vote on continuation of our DNA testing. Rapid Creek, Mr. Williams.
The pathogenicity with Dr.
Well,
Murray.
we're on the one before.
Source identification first, number 9.
Oh,
H2E.
Dr. Murray's here, but he's not. He's too. And DNA.
okay.
That's why we have our
Characterization is second. We're going to go on source identification. She may contribute here, but
This is the one we had budgeted $150,000 for, and what it is a second attempt at measuring more of the stream flows that we have. We only had 4, or was it 5? I think it was 4.
4 sites.
4 sites. The first time we discovered that there wasn't any human waste present in the lower portion of Canyon Lake as it outflows at number 2 on the new map. Do you have that new map?
I do. Give me a second here. Go grab the pastry while it's waiting.
Can we do with that idea?
we could take a 5-minute break, let this load. If the presenter would care to do that. It'd take a while, Ben? To load
It should, but there it goes. Now this will just be.
Just back it up here. It's down the page.
Blame Bill Gates.
Right after green roof.
So
Here
there's-
comes. Those are the first 4 sites listed there in that,
Yeah.
in that letter.
So here's the new
We're not taking a break
sites.
yet.
Okay, so we decided at one of our executive meetings that sites 1, 2, 3, and 4 will remain the same, be sampled at the same time. And we're trying to figure out exactly where the human waste came from that we detected that has the other project in it, the pathogenicity study. And we broke it up by labeling. As you walk down from left to right, you have 2A, 2B, 2C, then you go to 3, which is the bridge site at
Soccer fields at
St. Pat's
Highway
Street.
44. Yep, St.
Yeah.
Pat.
And then on down we have, my voice is kind of going because I have the crud. 3A is at above Green Valley along Rapid Creek. 3B is at, I think it's the waste treatment plant. Well, it's below. 3C, 3D, and 4. There's a site at that Dan Van Cleves here could point out that's above the site that we were measuring at 4. That represents, I think, their outflow. Just a minute. Yeah.
I was trying to help. But
That's all right.
I didn't.
Yeah, you can pull it down just a little bit. See down on the right-hand side.
There's 2 overlaid there, right?
Right, they're real
3C
close
and
together.
3D.
And then another site above that in the creek.
So 3C and 3D must be above and below the outflow.
Just for an interruption here, Dave Van Cleve is operations manager out there for the wastewater treatment plant. And Dave helped us diagnose our test sites. We met with the executive, or a few of us met with Dave. And so he's here this evening. Thank you for being here.
Certainly. I believe 3D is just above the wastewater treatment plant outflow, and then 4 is below.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
there's a 3C that's
3C's
That's
above,
on the
3D's
Anderson
they
below.
kind of lay on top of
Oh, okay,
it.
I
Doesn't
see
look
it
like
C and D are
yeah.
kind of like
But
one's
3D
in, one's
may
out.
be the outfall itself.
Inflow and outflow.
D
I
was
believe,
supposed to be the
plant.
outflow, I think.
3D
and
is
C
the
is
outfall
wherever you.
itself, and then C.
Kelsey might know too.
Or just downstream from the plant. 3C and D are kind of ahead of start and finish of the plant operation, I believe.
Yes.
And 4 is just downstream a little ways further.
So this represents 11 sites as opposed to 4. And what it'll do is it'll carve up Rapid Creek to help identify where the location is for first human waste. Because at 2 we don't have any, but at 3 we had a significant amount of E. coli in the water. And then of course when you go below the waste treatment plant, it kind of goes off the chart. In the winter anyway. We also had a request to include in this pair of wells that will do some of the same testing. I don't think we have a location for those wells yet. Downstream from the...
I got a couple already picked
Okay.
out.
Oh,
I just got to physically hand them.
Drinking water well, potable water wells. downstream.
shallow. Are they
Above
going to be
and below.
11 test sites for this and
2 possible well sites?
Yeah, one
Well sites.
above and below the waste plant.
Oh. Okay. Where above? Do you know? Have
Yeah.
a clue?
In Green Valley, in between Green Valley, there's a couple small farm areas where they have private wells near the creek. And then below the septic plant, right in the vicinity of 4, along the creek there is some residential right near the stream as well that has what I would call shallow wells. Some of them are only 100, 150 feet deep, so it would not be any surprise that with the wells being that shallow, that water from the stream is filtering through that very little amount of soil and getting into their well.
Dan.
I don't remember, Kelsey, if it was you or Emily that suggested we might want to look at a DENR site at is it Farmingdale.
I think that's on the list. Isn't that number 3A?
No, that's not on this map.
You don't have the scale. It's not on
He's
the
got the
map.
airport on the right-hand side, so it's past. It's down.
okay.
Farmingdale's quite a ways from there.
Well, we determined 1 and 2 had no human waste last time, right?
Correct.
1, 2, 3 have spike.
3 had the
Part of
spike,
part of the year.
and 1's kind of. You know,
1 is clean,
1 is clean and 2 is clean, right? Except for
Yeah.
dog waste from the dog park
and the geese in the winter.
and geese. Can we eliminate 1? Because I know the budget came in just slightly more.
This study, I think we're okay on budget. It's the next, it's a little higher.
Right.
Yeah, the idea is we wanted to maintain, we're calling these controls,
Right.
so that we have a record of exactly the same site before and after, even though maybe it came up clean this time, who knows, maybe it won't be next time, or we're also doing things like, I think we were looking at flow, is that?
Well, flow and temperatures.
Okay, and that may be, upstream data may be useful in understanding what's happening downstream.
And then,
These will be monthly samples.
Yep, and then I just want to add one thing, just because it's clean of the wastes that Emily was testing for. In our previous studies, we actually found bacteria that were risky. So that may influence your decision as to whether you want to eliminate one of those upstream sites.
We were just looking for the human variations of it.
Yeah, so if you're just looking for that,
Well, remember, we also added nitrates, which we don't have last time, so whether that, what goes on upstream with that, I don't know.
My only reasoning is between 3 and 3A, there's a large gap.
Yeah.
And near Elkvale, between 3 and 3A, there's two large subdivisions. One's the mobile park that runs right near Elkvale on both sides of it. One just to the west, and that's all right near the creek as well. And I don't know if, I think a lot of them are on leach fields too, and if they're in the floodplain with a leach field, there could be a huge jump between 3 and 3A that could be coming from the one new subdivision and the one
Is
older
the density,
mobile park area.
density of homes in Green Valley higher or lower than the areas you're talking about? As far as potential.
Now it's lower, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it'll flow downstream.
I'm saying,
Yeah.
population density, input potential.
You know,
Does that
Green
have-
Valley's got a little bit more spacier lots than the mobile home park near Elkville. What is
So
it, South
moving-
Valley Drive?
How many of those are all septic? Or a good portion? We've got that map with septic locations on it too.
It's South Valley Drive is the area I'm.
So maybe we need to dial that in. These locations, we get the count in our proposal, 11. If we were retaining that, and the first vote reflects that, there are some flexibilities here. We've got most of them dialed in, but if there's some additional information we're gaining to better this study, we should probably talk about that.
I kind of agree with Jim. I mean, I live in that area, but there is a lot of new development, that Inferno or the gas station there, and I think there's going to continue to be some more housing development down in there, and it's right on that creek.
We're going to be on sanitary sewer.
With that increased activity, maybe
The
that,
city guy
that's
might
a
know.
long
South
gap.
Valley, is that all septic?
So Kelsey, do you know when the sampling is beginning next month? What's our date?
Or is
November.
there a lot of city, or is there a lot of
I think we had
Once you
started
get past-
sampling in January.
Sampling January.
We had originally intended to start
That's what I
sampling
was
in
thinking.
November, but I
Okay.
don't
Near
think
that
the second
mobile
vote
home
will
area.
happen until December.
Okay. Second vote December, so
Yep.
like Galen, he went at risk and went a month ahead of his
Right.
second approval. And
We can
Got it.
discuss that after the first vote, I guess.
that's totally,
Sure.
we're just trying to parallel some of the data we had last time that started in November again.
Yeah, I mean,
that was-
ideally, that would
Now, if we're
be-
wrapping the year is
Yeah.
a year, so maybe it doesn't have an effect. So that's a business decision for you and H2E. So
Right.
that's totally fine.
And we're, as far as crossover, we're flexible on that. I think.
So,
Mr. Chairman, are you taking questions from the audience as well?
oh, I'm sorry. Oblivious as usual. Thank you.
Below Green Valley, down below.
Just as an introduction, I'm Joanne Noyes from the South Dakota Geological Survey. And maybe you want to consider this. As part of the USGS and South Dakota Surveys joint study on the, I don't remember, Galen and Foster and Gary Putnam's study.
than groundwater and
Yeah.
streets on street management.
Okay, in conjunction with that big long report that they put together, they put in 7 wells in the Green Valley Estates area, and currently there are 6 left that I am monitoring and trying to keep up, and I have water level data all the way back to 2006, and those wells would be available to be used if anyone wanted to use them in a study.
So the drinking water wells are just ground,
They're just
water level,
wells.
quality.
Right, they're just monitoring wells for
Okay,
now.
monitoring wells.
And I'm just doing water levels because the survey itself does not have anything in the budget to do the sampling with them. But I believe George Farabee was on the board way back when this study had been done, and couldn't see the point in abandoning these wells. And so we have kept all of the ones that the survey put in. So they are available for use.
What's the depth?
Say in the order of about 20 feet, 20 to 40.
20 to 40 feet.
Oh,
I'd
well, that would
say.
be a good
They're
for
probably
a shallow water well for that
They're,
area.
oh yeah, they're
probably
definitely
representative of
shallow,
what the
alluvial
regular
wells.
home, yeah.
They were specifically put in to evaluate the
But they might be
alluvial
stagnant because
So I guess I could
nobody's been
see
drawing from them, correct?
2 or 3 board members probably collecting that information to Dan. Can that data be sent to Dan?
Yeah, in fact, I've got a map that I just thought I'd bring along tonight.
Thank you.
Reason.
So I guess I'm seeing if the first vote says yes, second vote says yes, we're going to need to define exactly where sample sites are.
That'd be
And if these
a good
contribute
one before
to the study
the plan.
and the counts we approve, then I think we're going to have a pretty good, this is a
Yeah.
good starting point.
Green Valley, right?
That's Green Valley, and we
So
lost.
this is for me?
Yes, we lost 1 well in there when they put, I believe, the water line in, and we thought we were going to lose another one when they put the sewer line in along. Yeah, was it Southside?
Southside.
Yeah, but in fact they went through the road instead of in the ditch, so we currently have 6 left.
Okay. Well, eventually, Bob.
Thanks for volunteer.
Yes, that's great information. Thank you.
All right.
So at this point in time, any other
Move to
discussion?
vote?
We can vote on this, Ken?
You know, at one time, even into the 90s, this was nothing but cattails
Okay.
out here. This is the same area we're talking about. And so that's all surface water. To put in septic tanks, they had to fill them up with water and dig holes and then put grounds over the top of them
Mounted
and then
systems.
pump the water out of them. And they acted just like a boat. When they pumped the water out of them, they had to put other water into them or something to hold them down because they popped right out of the ground. When you're talking about your septic tanks, they gave them permits to put those in.
Nothing to vote on yet. There's no motion to vote on yet.
Well, I move we approve the funding.
I second that.
Okay, now there's a motion. Any other discussion? Questions?
I have one too.
Bob? Oh. Was
Um,
there- was there
go
one?
ahead. Yeah, name from race.
I guess I would go back to my standard question as far as why would the taxpayer want to fund this project?
Well, it kind of, can I lift that?
Please.
I think it actually plays in with, it's part of our entire area. If Dan had a picture of the 9 different districts, actually what we discovered here on the first study affects almost all of the Rapid Creek drainage. And that if the E. coli bacteria is as bad as we're told, it's contaminating possibly the groundwater. We don't know for sure. The wells might give us indications on that. I think it also lends itself to helping the city understand the impacts that the present system that's aging has. Dan and I, we're going to have a meeting with Dave Van Cleve and the others before this meeting to talk about what advantages would it provide for the most people within our district. And it would, from Pactola to Farmingdale, all the way down to wherever we enter into the Cheyenne River down by Wasta. All those people along that drainage could be affected, I think, by the E. coli that's either in the system in the creek or in the shallow wells all the way down. That's the reason I'd vote for it, was because it's going to affect and help to identify where there could be possible breaks or something, or just that's.
I was trying to bring up your map, but
that's okay.
So we've already funded one project.
Yes, we did.
Which identified a human health risk.
But
It was so toxic that you couldn't even walk into it without washing.
Nathan's up. Got the floor.
So I don't, this is a very expensive project. I don't know that from a taxpayer perspective, I don't know that the value is there. Yes, it would be interesting. Like I said last time, we funded a project. We've already got information from that project. That information is already available to people to use as they see fit. They can make decisions based on that. And I think, from my perspective, I think that's where we should leave it. I think there might be more apropos projects down the road for us, like trying to get water from east of us out here. I'd rather save money for projects that are absolutely essential rather than interesting. So that's just my take on it.
Bob? I think it's a health threat, a significant one, possibly. I don't know. Right now, we don't know exactly what sort of a threat it is or where it could be remediated. And I'm not sure if Dave has funding for this, but that's one of the things that we do is when others don't fund projects like that. And I understand, what is the per person kind of significance.
I think we have larger health threats living all around us. I think just going to Walmart and grabbing a cart, you're probably very prone to picking up community-acquired MRSA right there. The water, like I said, we've already provided a study. We've got information available to people. Water is typically, if it's a public water system, it's treated. Even if it's James was talking about wells 100 feet deep or whatever, based on my experience, 100 feet, most bacteria don't survive going through soil 100 feet. So that's one of the reasons why groundwater wells are generally pretty safe unless they're under the influence of surface water. I just don't see the benefit to the average taxpayer. So yes, it would be interesting. I'd be interested, but I don't see it as an essential project, and I'd rather save those funds. So I'm done.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anything from the public?
Was this the project that my director was going to get Rapid City to pay part of?
Well, yes, we had.
How are we doing on that?
Well, we had a meeting set up last week, and I had a family. My mother's quite ill, and I had to go back to eastern South Dakota, so we had to postpone the meeting. We're going to meet again at a different date, but we were trying to meet before this meeting, and it didn't work out because I had to go back to the eastern part of the state.
Is there a chance, in your opinion, there's a chance the city might pitch in, help?
Well, we're gonna pitch it. I can't speak for the city, but I've talked to Dan Kuhn, I've talked to Stacy Titus, talked to Dave Van Cleve, Dave's here, and they're interested. I don't know.
Probability 50%, 75%?
I hate to
Zero.
guess.
Does this start with Public Works Committee, or what's the?
We're starting with Dan. We're going to meet with the staff first.
Okay.
The three I mentioned are the key people.
It would go through Dan Kuhn and Dale Tech.
And Dale Tech and Stacy Titus.
First people to go. And then eventually Public Works. We don't currently have money in the budget for it. We had talked about combining some in-kind services with doing some basic E. coli sampling, which we did. That was part of where we started with the 3C and 3D. So we did that all summer, looking at those. We know that there are E. coli influences upstream of the plant. We didn't. When we looked at the treatment plant, we had no violations of permit. As a matter of fact, we never got to 100 on any of our counts. But we had, I think I counted, there were like, during the disinfection season, there was 19 samples, 9 above, 10 below, that were in exceedance of that daily limit of 235. And they generally follow each other. If it's coming down from above the plant, that's what you're finding.
Councilman Nordstrom is here, and we'd appreciate if there's any input, since you played with water a little bit in your past.
He's a definite yes, though.
Pardon me?
For the city helping, Elliot, probably 2/3
Well,
for Betsy.
I just wondered if there's any input you'd like to give us, or not to tip your cards or anything else. Your interest level in what Mr. Van Cleve's trying to achieve here.
I have to lean on Dave and the staff to come up with the budget, and as Dave said, I don't recall anything being in the 2018 or 2019. I can stand to be corrected, but I don't recall any money being set aside for this, for any additional study beyond the C and D sites.
Okay.
And like I say, I could be corrected.
You know, I'll have to go along with Dayton. We're trying to get the buggy before the horse here. We know we got contamination coming out of the water, the sewage area here. And, you know, if we got a lot of surface water, that's all going to back up. And we're going to get conflict of interest in different sampling and so on like that. So as soon as those get straightened out, and I know their city and counties trying to get that in their budget, and that and the treatment plant and water incoming, until then we can't make a decision on what we're going to do. So
Can we do a study?
we've done studies after studies after studies. We still come up with the same thing.
This is unique, and it's in Bob.
You know, can we postpone this for any period of time? I mean, what we discovered in that first study, so that we could work out all the details in advance of breaking this up again. Is there any argument that would include, preclude us from pushing this down the road, like till next year?
Other than we have a graduate student, we were hoping, a current graduate student, we were hoping to support with this project.
So, Mr. Williams, are you suggesting a year from now, or?
Yeah.
So do we want to start in November, no matter when we do this? Is that? So,
not necessarily. I mean,
okay.
there's still a year's worth of data. We had sort of aimed for consistency, but.
Well, the data that we've collected is publicly available in our studies. And so if we have another study and we don't have concurrence here for the next studies, are we still going to have, I mean, that's still going to be valid for a period of time. Do you have any estimate of how long that'll be before our data becomes no good?
No, I would say the sooner we can collect more data, the better.
Yeah.
Just to sort of get on top of the problem a little bit better.
So that we could actually
Dan?
Just from a presentation point of view, the data, to me, it's much easier if we just start in November in both cases. Otherwise, you're trying to line up different graphs that where November over here is actually the November of the next year, but lining up with the November of the previous study, which is an earlier November. So it's just my 2 cents on it, starting on the non-November time.
Suggestion of waiting is trying to leverage some extra
so we have
participants.
more coordination with the city, and
I think we should wait until we have the chance to visit with the city personally. I think the city, I mean, this is basically in the city, what we're doing here, and I would think the city would have an interest in understanding what water quality issues there are in Rapid Creek as it flows through the city, and even in the Rapid Valley Sanitary District, which, as I understand, is going to be, like Green Valley, is going to be part of Rapid Valley, potentially, at least the water. They have water for Rapid Valley.
Ken?
Make a motion, we table this until further investigation's done.
When there's a,
That way it can be redrawn at any time.
I think we have to call a vote so that it can be.
Table can supersede the vote of the motion.
I don't think we need to vote on this tonight necessarily. We just move it to the next meeting.
Well, if we table till the next meeting, be on the agenda until we're ready to.
That's it.
Because we really had intended to meet with the city and didn't work out because I have an illness in my family.
No fault of anybody.
Well, then I guess we should go table it.
When's our next meeting going to be?
December.
Yeah.
Is
11th?
December 4th?
11th, probably. I believe.
Correct. So Kelsey's item is up next on the agenda, which pretty much goes hand in hand with this.
So in the minutes, this will be tabled, right?
Well, I
there
was
may
trying
be
to say
two.
that we need her input in
Yeah,
order to table it, because
I'm just wondering if she changes your mind, which may or may not be possible, you could come back to this.
if you table it now, there's no further discussion.
Right.
She has input.
Well, then let's hear it. Is this something for tonight, or do you want to
Yeah,
just?
well, this is the next.
It's on the agenda.
Oh, I see. So as far as this
Well, I guess you
motion
gotta
is
deal with
concerned,
this.
as far as this particular motion is concerned,
We're still in discussion.
what did we do with this particular?
It's a motion to table at this point.
It's tabled, okay.
But we're still in.
I don't think we should table it. I think we just postpone it to the next meeting.
Well, that's what tabling it would be.
Okay, what's going to go in the minutes? Is it going to be tabled or postponed or what?
If it's tabled, it can be brought back
Okay.
as well as.
But I was just.
Versus a
I was
continuation.
just suggesting that we get her input before we table it. Then just as soon as she makes her input, if it makes.
I understand your logic on that, except for rapid schools don't go that way, do they?
Well,
Did you hear a second?
Well, you're not here second on the table, but I would like to know if the motion be withdrawn, or
Okay,
if that would be a possibility.
withdrawn sounds
If
right.
if the motion is withdrawn, then it's not an active motion.
I withdraw that motion till her input is made.
But you didn't make the motion. Bilateral did.
Bialata made the motion.
Motion to
Bilateral
approve
motioned
funding
and
was-
Durlow seconded.
And the
So
seconded was.
You
who
want to
was the second?
withdraw it?
Well, it's still under discussion, so
First
during
off,
discussion,
I
she
have
can
to
get up and
withdraw the
speak.
table.
She can speak to the future agenda item, sidebar to the, because it's related to this one we're on now. Could continue discussion with.
Yeah, so I can only speak to our portion of the study. I can't speak to what Emily's thoughts
Can
would
you
be.
speak up just a little bit?
Yeah, sorry, I'm a little sick, so I'll try my
Yeah, I
best.
know.
As far as the start date of this study, we could be very flexible. To me, it actually does make sense to wait for the meeting with the city to see what kind of support that they could sort of buy into this project. So as far as we're concerned, we're willing to start at any time. I wouldn't suggest postponing it an entire year, though. I would say the sooner we start it after the ending of the previous study, the better.
Spring semester, January.
And that's sort of when we had anticipated starting it anyway, so. But if it goes to the first vote in December, when is the second vote?
January.
It would be January.
Okay.
It would be January again. Back up. Dan?
I was just gonna, in case anybody didn't know, Kelsey's part of the project was looking for the toxic component of the E. coli.
The health risk.
I made a little cartoon here that I was trying to figure out how to present this if it came up, but we've got the total E. coli, which is what the routine testing does. However, a lot of that E. coli is harmless, and going down here to the H2E part of it, they would categorize it in terms of what ratio was from these different mammal species. However, that still doesn't tell you how dangerous it is. So Dr. Murray's study would specifically look for this subset here, pathogenic E. coli. So I just wanted to clarify these are two different studies that go closely together.
Then I will withdraw my motion, and I will make a new motion that we place this on the agenda for December, pending discussing it with the City of Rapid.
I can second that, if that's the way we want to handle it. You want to withdraw your motion?
And continue this to December.
And when?
Place this on the December agenda.
Okay. And take it up on December, okay.
So discussion on that motion.
And then
Seconded?
Seconded by
Me.
Gerlo.
And the question is, do we want her input before we hold this particular item?
If there's any more input to be had.
If he suspends it, and she's got a second to suspend it, that's it. We can talk about it, but that doesn't get her on the floor to explain her part of it.
Well, it does after.
December, you mean?
She's been invited to discuss it with us at this point in time, as agenda item 10 is following this. So her piece of agenda item 10 came in on 9 now. So if there's
I don't know, yeah, does
if there's
anybody
any
have
additional
any-
to relative to
Yeah.
9, I mean, like you say, you can't speak to their proposal. What's your follow on science?
Yeah, just follow me to.
Is so.
I'll certainly answer any questions about our characterization of the bacterial population if you have them tonight.
Motion on the floor is to continue this to December. So any opposed?
Number 9.
For number 9 and 10.
Number 9 and 10, yeah, we can call
Is
it.
that what I heard? James, is that what I heard? Number 9 and 10? Or are we just talking 9?
9. We'll give her any other chance on 10, and we can take 10 up in a second.
So, I thought it was for 9 and 10.
We're on agenda 9, number 9, and to continue till December until we've met with the city
Okay.
representatives.
Okay. That's good.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to add to my director's comments about the city being a willing participant. It seems like at least, I know it's just one study, but it looks like the water coming into Rapid from uphill is basically lane, pier, whatever words, minimal contamination, I'll put it that way, uphill. But once the water flows through Rapid, it's quite contaminated. So I think if I were Rapid City, I'd want to know what's causing that. That'd be the way I'd argue it if I were my director.
I agree with what you're saying, absolutely.
Thank you.
I do too.
Yeah, I do too.
And I guess we can
Yeah, whether it's a sewer plant,
still
broken line.
go through with it after the December meeting.
If there were 2 affirmative votes, it would need to be December, January, to be back to back. If it weren't postponed again for whatever reason, so.
Okay,
That'd be the quickest we could get an answer,
sounds good.
or it could be answered in December if it fails. So that's also an answer, so.
So we can move
Motion
on.
on the floor is to postpone 9 until December, pending a meeting with the city representatives and those of you who are assigned to do that.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Nay.
Nay.
Who opposed?
1 nay.
Nay.
2. Motion. 2
Gideon.
nays. Motion carries to December continuance of item number 9.
Gideon, who else did? Okay.
Gideon.
Nathan.
Okay. Anything new we need to know about on agenda item number 10?
So we let her speak if she
Would
has
you like
anything
to
else
speak?
to say on this.
I think she should.
As long as we drug
You're welcome to,
Did you
welcome to
explain
come up
everything
even though
else you
this one's
wanted
been
to?
postponed.
Is there any
I
other
guess
chance?
does anybody have any questions for us as to the value of our portion of the study? Because I guess one thing that I would remind you is that this state has the highest rate of Shiga toxigenic E. coli infections in the country. And it is sort of our hypothesis, especially based off of that original year-long study that we did, that the water is likely a reservoir for some of these bacteria that are making people in South Dakota sick. And so I just want to make sure that you guys are clear on sort of the potential implications of our study. Does anybody have questions about it?
Okay, I was going to take one off here and then
Yeah.
these gentlemen. You anticipate working with some Department of Health or folks within the state or locale?
Absolutely.
What's developed since then?
So the Department of Health has agreed to provide those isolates that come from patients to the best of their ability, so that we can compare them sort of side by side with the bacteria in the water to see if we can actually get a match. And if we do, that has major implications. And if we don't, then we can, maybe say that the water isn't the reason that we have such a high rate, and we can redirect efforts into looking into another environmental reservoir.
And then Thomas?
You keep saying this state, but you never say this area. I have an email in that come out of the eastern part of the states that says that we have 2 contaminated high E. coli areas in East River, and that hasn't been publicized either.
Right, and so as far as infection rates go across the state, there are slightly higher numbers of infection on the other side of the state just because there's more people over there, but the overall rate is pretty similar on both sides.
But our area here, just below the city septic area, is higher than, what do we got, 2.2 million per?
I don't know the specific.
See, they've raised that so they don't have to turn it in as a toxic area.
And
Even
so,
though it is.
And so there's no mandates on looking at Shiga toxins in the water. So since there's no criteria for that, it's not a reportable thing. And I don't think anybody besides our group, except for maybe a study in the past, did one of you guys look at Shiga toxins in water? No. I seem to remember there was somebody who did something sort of tangential to this maybe 10 or so years ago. But to the best of my knowledge, we're the only ones doing this in this state, and
one of 4 groups looking at it across the country.
Thomas?
So I saw some of the research from the previous study actually made it through South Dakota News Watch, made it on Kelloland, especially when John Morrell had those nitrate leaks into the Big Sioux. Now, has there been any thought or any working on a comparative study of how western South Dakota fares with like the Big Sioux around the Sioux Falls, working Watertown I-29 corridor, or are you just primarily looking at this, or is there a possible comparative study? Because in the article it looked like you guys were possibly doing that.
Yep, so our original studies, the East Dakota Water Development District actually funded 2 separate studies, one where we just looked over the course of a summer on the Big Sioux River, and then Skunk Creek, which is a tributary. And then they actually funded a year-long project that didn't quite coincide with the project that we did here for West Dakota, but we do have data from both sides of the state. At this point, we haven't pursued a sort of concurrent study of both sides of the state, but in the future, that I think is where we're headed.
Okay.
Department of Health is alerting West Nile cases, West Nile virus cases, etc. At what level would they give an alert for data that you would produce or something that came out of the study that would say, warning,
And
downstream?
that's the question. I think it sort of depends on the data and what we find. And really there's no baseline for what the level of danger is. And that's sort of what we're trying to establish with these first couple of studies, is what is the sort of normal baseline, and then when does it sort of exceed that baseline and create an even higher risk.
Yeah.
So the question, the cases where people are affected by this pathogenic E. coli, do they get it from immersion or drinking, or do they know where this is coming from?
I mean, generally speaking, you get sick from accidentally ingesting it, so that can come through recreational use. The sort of important factor of these STEC infections is that the infectious dose is really, really low. So a single drop of water could potentially contain enough of these bacteria to make you, pretty seriously sick, if not cause a fatal disease.
Because the wastewater treatment plant turns off their disinfecting process, and the E. coli levels get very high.
Yeah, and we don't
during
know
the winter.
does that coincide with the levels of these sort of pathogens as well? We don't know.
Yeah, Bob, sorry.
What are the temperature ranges? In the winter, when we are not using the UV protection, does that kill them when they come off?
Yeah, so a good portion of the E. coli bacteria only are going to survive close to body temperature, which is about 37 degrees Celsius. But unfortunately, these pathogens, as they're sort of picking up genes that enable their own survival, it's those genes that sort of consequently make humans sick. And so a lot of these sort of resistance genes that allow them to survive at lower temperatures, I mean, they can survive the winter in the sediments as low as 3 or 4 degrees. So they definitely do sort of hunker down and survive the winter in the sediments.
Well, they clearly survive in the water because that's what the study showed. In the winter.
James?
Well, now that we've heard all our discussion on this, I move that we move this to our December agenda as well, along with the previous item, so that way we can make sure we vote on it.
I did quite hear.
We're going to move.
He wants to move 10 to December with 9.
Okay. Now that everybody's had their
That's the motion.
That's what I wanted
That's
to
the
hear.
motion on the floor.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion second. Any other discussion?
I have one question.
Yep.
Would you be available to attend a meeting with with us
Yeah, just-
in the city.
Yeah.
Because you obviously know a lot more about this than I do, anybody probably out here, so I think it would be very helpful and
sure.
informative for the city to listen to what you have to say and what you've learned so far.
Sure.
And probably have it, and I'll check with Emily, see if she can come too. Just-
Okay.
I think that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Call vote. Those in favor of postponing this item to the December 11th meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay, motion carries. We'll continue this in December, again pending that meeting with city folks. Thank you, Dr. Dr. Murray. Pardon me? Time for a break. We've got an easy one coming up. If you want to hit that real quick, and then Gail can go home.
Nope, take a break.
Oh,
Fresh
okay.
minds.
All right. Gail was a big break. We'll take 5. Thank you.
Do you have a card that I can use your phone number? Yeah.